Welcome to episode 314 of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Bet365, our sports betting partner. It's been with us all through the 2024 playoffs. They'll be here with Bet365 to provide you all the news, analysis, lines, and betting options for the playoffs until one team is left standing. We got two, and who knows? We got Game 6 Friday and potentially a Game 7 on Monday. Get all the odds, all the options, and use the promo code DAILY365 at Bet365. I'm Jason Greger as we welcome to the show from the DFO Rundown, Frank Saravalli. Frank, how you doing?
I'm good. Back in Edmonton. Feels like the 47th time these playoffs, and feels good to be back. Game 6 on Friday night. Literally cannot wait. It's going to be unbelievable. And this is what it's all about. But we'll talk Stanley Cup final in a bit. Lots happening on the trade front so far already.
Oh, huge day yesterday. I know I saw some people, you know what? I think this is smart. The NHL, you have the 2 days off, and obviously they don't like announcements. They said to teams, no announcements on game days. That's fine. So, there's lots of other business that has to happen. We're just over a week away from the NHL draft. There's qualifying offers that got to have to happen. There's free agency starting in exactly 11 days. So, you got other business going on. But let's start with the trade. Let's start with the Pierre-Luc Dubois, Darcy Kuemper trade. So Pierre-Luc Dubois has 7 years left at 8.5. Darcy Kuemper has 3 years left at just over $5 million. It's a straight up goalie for player trade. What do you think of this deal?
I thought it was an incredibly smart piece of business by Rob Blake and the LA Kings. We had talked last pod or the pod before about how they really seriously had to consider the buyout for Pierre-Luc Dubois. And the reason why I said that was because I didn't think that there was anyone out there that would be willing to take it off their hands. And on that front, maybe a little bit surprised that the Caps were willing to take it in full and take all the risk. But I guess from a Caps perspective, I'm not as down on it as someone thinks. But let me finish off with the King side of it. They desperately had to solve their goaltending situation. And with Kuemper, he's a guy that they know, having been in their organization before. He played really well in his short stint in LA before ending up in Arizona. And he's not at a price point that's going to break the bank. So now you go into next season with Kuemper and Hronek. You have a team that's proven that it can defend, and there's opportunity there for the Kings to move forward. So they end up getting $3+ million in cap space for the next 3 years. And then on top of it, they have a clean, fresh slate on Dubois for years 4, 5, 6, and 7 that were remaining on his contract at 8.5. So huge moment for the Kings to be able to just slide that off their books. And when you look at asset management, and I know a lot of people they were crushing the Kings on social media on Wednesday saying, look, here are all the pieces that you traded, the first round pick plus the 3 players that went to Winnipeg to get Dubois plus the contract. All of that essentially now becomes for Kuemper. And I look at it from the perspective of, yeah, all of that is true. But when you talk about asset management, the only thing worse than a mistake is doubling down on one and keeping Dubois into next season and beyond when he clearly didn't work. They had to make some magic happen before his no move clause kicked in on July 1. And they did.
Yeah, I look at it. I think there's risks on both sides. And I actually, there's rewards on both sides.
What's the risk for the Kings?
Well, the risk for the Kings is Darcy Kuemper has 3 years left, and he's gone .921, .909, .890 save percentage the last 3 years, and his goals against average has gone up every year. So he's 34 years of age. Can he find his game again? Now, LA has been a place that's somewhat of a safe haven for goaltenders. There's no question about that. But everybody knows the Kings going to have to change their style a little bit. Their system has to change. Their players all said it sucked. They don't like playing it anymore. And frankly, it didn't work come playoff time. They lost 3 years in a row to the same team. They couldn't beat them. So there is a risk there. Now, Pierre-Luc Dubois turns 26 next week. And I understand that he has been a player who asked out of Columbus, then wanted out of Winnipeg, had 1 year in LA. And the year in LA is his worst season as a pro, if you look at it from a production standpoint, right? 40 points. This guy has 3 60-point seasons under his belt at the age of 25. There's not a lot of guys like that. He's big, he's heavy, he fits a lot of the Washington style of play. They've always been a big team. You look at Kuznetsov's gone, Backstrom's gone, so it's going to be him and Strome, right? He knows he's playing in the top 6. Lots of last year, Frank, he wasn't on the power play. He didn't play in the top 6 for lots of times in LA. So as much as he didn't play well, I don't think he was put in a position to succeed as often as he should have. And I kind of like this bet for Washington. I think there's a chance. Now, this guy, will I be surprised, Frank, if Pierre-Luc Dubois scores 75 to 80 points? I won't be shocked because he's shown 3 times under the age of 25 he can be a 60-point player. And you know what? It's lots of guys have taken, longer to mature and wake up. Now, maybe he never does, and maybe he continues on as that. So I think there's a risk reward there too. I think I kind of like it. I like the risk for both teams. You're right. LA has the benefit because they get out of it earlier, right? They save $3 million this year and they get out of it after 3 years. They're like, that's where the buyouts always, even if it wouldn't have been high dead cap space, this way there's none, and they free up the money. So, but the funny thing was, everybody was like, LA's got to improve their center ice position. Well, now they do have Quentin Byfield indoors, so they could easily just promote him. But
why do they need to improve their center ice position?
No, everybody's
Kopitar and Danault, and then if you want, you can play Byfield. I think they're as solidified as
that's
any
my
team.
point. But last year at the start of the season, Frank, everyone's like, oh, the Kings center ice position is the best in the league. Well, it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter because none of them are number 1 centers. Byfield might be. He's their best option moving forward to be a number 1 center. Danault's never been a number 1. Kopitar, I think, is past being a number 1. He's a really good player, but I don't think he's a number 1 center. So, and I'm not saying Dubois is either, but
I don't think there's any risk here for the Kings. Like, let's say worst case scenario, Kuemper can't go. Like, let's say he can't find his game again. Yeah. And he, like, worst case scenario, you bury him in the minors for 3 years, which is essentially what
they did with
buyout would have been for Dubois for these couple years. That's the very worst case scenario, and it's 3 years and you're done. I doubt very much that's going to be the case, but look at what the Oilers are going through right now with Jack Campbell. He's it's a very similar contract. They actually have the same length left.
Yeah.
So it's you look at it and you say it's not really much risk from the Kings' perspective because they got the heaviest burden off of their books. Well, and a guy who had all the leverage and control starting on July 1. He had full say on where he would go. And with this Stanley Cup final stretching to game 6, there was no guarantee that they would even get the 1/3 buyout for Dubois. So it again hastened what they needed to do. I realize the need that it solves for both teams. I just don't like the risk profile nearly enough from a Caps perspective. I see what you're saying about his ability to get back to being a 75 to 80 point or get there at some point. I think for me, for a guy who's now entering his 8th season on his 4th team, I'm way more down on that possibility. And if you've gone through all of this and received the payday, there's not really a ton of incentive. Like, I had multiple management.
There's personal pride incentive. You don't want to be 7 years and just be considered a dud, right? Like, I think you got a lot of self-respect internally to want to change the narrative around you as a player.
You'd have to start by changing the narrative around you as a person, which isn't good.
Both can happen.
It can, but I'd say given where we're at now, he's got a lot of work to do.
Oh,
and
hey, I'll agree.
This whole idea of he's really excited to go to Washington, like, I don't know how he could be anything but embarrassed that after 1 year and signing such a massive deal and a team giving up so much for you that you were basically punted to Mars and to any team that was willing to take you.
Yeah. Well, what about how? Because I still look back to how LA used him, Frank. I don't know if LA like. I don't like LA did a good job. You're right, and I agree with you on hey, if you make an error and you don't think he fits, and so you're not going to double down. But I'm not sold that LA. You make this big acquisition, you give up a lot for the guy, and you didn't really put him in the best position to succeed for a lot of the year, right?
Jay, this is the NHL. You got to earn it. You don't get handed it, and not when there's good players in front of you. I'm sorry. And not only that, the biggest knock against Dubois is he doesn't work. He doesn't grind.
Yeah.
And if you're not a worker, like you're just not going to get it.
Yeah, because
That's
I
the
look
big
at
knock is he's got all the talent in the world. He's got the size, he's got the body, but his compete and his work ethic are way lacking according to those who know him best.
yeah, no, that might be right, but I look at
It might
so
not. At some point, you are where you are. That's what I'm saying. So,
yeah,
and if you're going to sign up, would you sign up for 7 years at 8.5, not knowing the answer to it? I'm
yeah,
not sure that I would.
yeah, no, it's a risk, but I look at this. So Alex Laferriere was his most common line mate last year at 5-on-5, played 705 minutes with him. The next closest winger was Fiala at 259, and then you go to Kaliev at 182. Like, you know what? Fiala, sure, offensive guy, and sometimes you don't have a fit, but the other guys that he played with, it wasn't close
Have
to being.
you, but have you ever heard a group of teammates come out in the middle of the season and basically rip you publicly, not by name, but have you ever seen a team do that on the first year of an 8-year deal?
Yeah,
I've
like
never
I'd
seen
like
that
to
happen
know.
before.
Yeah, like I'd like to know what it was about his personality that didn't fit. Like, was he just selfish? Was he just simply that lacking in work ethic?
I don't know for certain, but that's been the inference the whole time.
Yeah. Well, that's a big issue. So that's one. I know might sound dumb, but you can change that. You can, if you're honest with yourself, you can look in the mirror and say, okay, you know what? Hey, I don't care. Like, he's going to go to Washington. He's going to play in their top 6. That's obvious. So maybe that'll help him. But I would hope someone has a conversation. Say, hey, Pierre, and it might have to be his parents or somebody else. Say, you know what, you got to up your work ethic here, kid. And that's why I think, Frank, I'm just not. I've seen lots of guys, bounce around the league who, and
The
then all of a
question
sudden,
isn't whether or not you'd be willing to write him off. That's not the question. The question is, would you be willing to take 7 times 8.5 in order to find out? And my answer, and this goes to how I answered the question, the risk profile that the Washington Capitals took on is not one I'm comfortable with.
yeah, that's fair. Well, it's for a degenerate gambler like yourself, I'm surprised by that because those are really good odds that you're getting.
I'm not a degenerate gambler. I am a once in a while gambler,
Yeah,
and not
yeah,
on
no,
sports.
yeah, no. I agree with you that it's risk, but hey, high risk, high reward sometimes. So there's just not a lot of 25-year-old centers who are 6'3". I get that there's baggage there that have 360-point seasons. So I get there's a big risk, but then I look at the Caps, they're getting older. They want to try to stay competitive for Ovi's final years. That's obvious through this, and they need to get younger. And so they got younger and with a big question mark. So I get it's a big risk, but I won't be surprised at all that because I look at Dubois and when he's on, that guy's got lots of skill. So it's a matter of are they going to be able to turn the light on more frequently? That's obviously the question. So now the other trade, big one, was Jacob Markstrom. This was rumored at the deadline. Didn't happen. They couldn't come to an agreement.
Well, actually, they did. They did come to an agreement, but it ended up being nixed by Flames ownership.
Yeah. Okay. So, which is odd that it got nixed and then what was the difference? Because they didn't want to retain some salary and now they're retaining salary. Like, what's the difference, Frank, on the deal that was nixed in March and the deal that went down yesterday?
I don't know the exact difference, but when you have to cut someone a check on July 1st for $2.5 million, which is a signing bonus, all of a sudden, I think the viewpoint changes on retainment. Oh, wait, so you mean if we move this guy now and we retain $2 million over each of the next 2 seasons, basically spreading it out, that we don't have to write him a sizable check on July 1? Oh, okay. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, the conversation's different.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking Flames ownership or whatever their thought process is. It's their team, their money. I wouldn't be all that comfortable paying players to not pay for paying players to not pay for me either. What I would say is there have been a ton of people ripping this deal from a Flames perspective. So let me ask you this trivia question and see if you know the answer. Who is the last goaltender to be traded for a first round pick? And when?
Pardon, what? Who was the last what?
Who's the last goaltender to be traded for a first round pick and when?
Well, I know Dwayne Rolson in 06, but that's probably too long ago.
Was it Ryan Miller?
Ryan
Yes.
Miller in 2014. Tyler's voice comes out of
Yes.
the heavens.
Good one.
Yes. It's been 10 years and almost 4 months
Hey,
since
goalies.
a goaltender in the NHL was traded for a first round pick.
I always tell people their expectations for returns on goalies historically. I don't know. Like I hear people talk about, oh, Allmark's going to get you 2 first rounders, and I'm like, what? Based on like, there's no history to support that.
But what I'm saying is, people are down on the return from the Flames, saying they own that's it. They got a 2025 first, and I'm like, 2025 is fine in the Flames wheelhouse. They're trying to be good for 2027. That's their target date. They want to be competitive in the meantime. But so here's a couple things that are some background. Yes, we know that Jacob Markstrom had interest in the New Jersey Devils, and having a full no trade, that was a key part of this process. And the belief is that he did give the Flames a few teams to work with. This is the one that they finally got it done with. The other part is he had pretty much made it clear to the Flames that he didn't have any interest in coming back. The Flames did a really good job keeping that information under the wraps, but that changes the specter and viewpoint of how you see the return of this deal. So you have a goalie that has full veto rights and has told you that he doesn't want to come back. And you get a first round pick, and I think a prospect who's a real reach. Like, I know the Flames have really targeted size on their back end, and in Kevin Ball, who I first started to really kind of key in on at the World Juniors a number of years back. I was the Alexis Lafreniere World Juniors. The Wrecking Ball, that's what we called him during that tournament. I view him, just if you're thinking size around the league, I view Kevin Ball as a more limited Vinny Desharnais. Not as good of a skater. So he could be, he could be a third pair option for you, but you get a 2025 first that's top 10 protected. If the Devils miss the playoffs next season and are picking inside the top 10, the pick slides to 2026 and it's unprotected. So all in all, given the circumstances, do you think the Flames did poorly in this deal?
No, I didn't. I thought, the Flames, I'm fine with the trade because I never expect a big return for goaltenders, especially at a time when there's supposedly lots of goalies on the market. Allmark's out there, right? There's other goalies that are out there.
Saros,
so, yeah.
Gustafson.
So
I mean, that was my point, was the optionality that the Devils had too. It's not like there was only one team to trade with if you're the Devils.
Yeah. Now, Markstrom's the guy who I think, he plays a lot. And I think that's what New Jersey wanted, Frank. Now, they have a pretty solid backup, so I think they would be smart. I think they need to limit the starts of Markstrom more to a comfortable 53 to 55 start range, maybe 56, 7, to allow A, Jake Allen to play, and B, not to run Markstrom into the ground, right? I don't think it's wise. Now, he's shown at times that he can play well when he plays a lot. There's no question about it, but if they have aspirations of going deep in the postseason, then it's better if they don't do it. That's been proven for most goaltenders except Vasilevsky. And I look at New Jersey, they clearly need to upgrade their goaltending. Kevin Ball was, they got so many good young defensemen that are better than him that, and there's nothing wrong with a good third pair defenseman. I think when you see good teams, I think people downplay the importance. Like if you're a really good number 5, right? Like look at Florida's third pair. Look at all, like, people in Vancouver and other places thought Oliver Ekman-Larsson was terrible and out of the look at him in Florida, man. He's been very good. Like, I know people didn't like his effort maybe on the empty netter, but let's be real. That's picking apart things. They weren't going to win that
What
game.
happened there? Like, just as an aside, what? Dude,
I
the
I
game
think he
was
thought
still
the goal.
going on.
I think he thought the puck went in.
He must have, because that was that was a brain fart, because there was
Yeah.
still plenty of time to get a rush together.
Yeah. I honestly think he thought the puck went in for sure.
If I was Kachuk and I did all that work to try and keep that puck out of the net, I would have turned around and fired it at him on the other end of it. I know I say that facetiously, but like legitimately, that was very odd.
Yeah, it was. But so I look at if Ball becomes a consistent third pair defenseman, the key for this trade for Calgary is your amateur scouts are going to have to hit on that pick. And that's Captain Obvious stuff, but it's true, right? Like first round draft picks and not all first rounders are equal. If it ends up being, at 20 to 25, you can still get good picks, but it's not a top 10 pick. So you have to have, realistic aspirations about what it can be. The best it'll be ever is a number 11.
That's not true. 2026.
No, I said in 2025.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes,
but
I understand.
Don't underestimate the value of you had to get Dustin Wolf in there.
Yeah.
This is a 2-time AHL goalie of the year MVP. Like he needs to play.
I'll say this though about Wolf, Frank. They got to have realistic expectations about him. The AHL and the NHL is very different. I agree, give him a chance, and he's a rookie goalie, man. There's very few that come in and are just like lights out. So I would caution.
He's not that young anymore, is my point.
Yeah, but NHL is different.
Turned 23 in April.
Yeah, the shooters are way different. That's all I'm saying.
But so Stuart Skinner is a guy who didn't really have, just to compare the team up the road, didn't really have any pedigree, was expected to be a backup, is thrust into the role when Campbell can't get the job done. Why isn't
bigger too?
Okay, but why isn't Dustin Wolf able to make the transition as a really pedigreed goalie?
Well, like I said again, the American League, like Stuart Skinner had been a starter in the American League, had some pretty good numbers that will translate to being a solid.
They're not even close to Dustin Wolf.
They're not close, but they're all look at the teams, and they always have a very veteran team. They've had veteran teams down there, and at the AHL, veterans make life easier for goalies. You watch. I hope that Wolf comes out of the gate and is spectacular, but I've already seen the expectation level for Wolf are unrealistic. That's all I'm saying. Like, it's hard to be a shorter goalie and dominating the NHL. There's just very few of them. That's just a simple numbers game. So, like, UC Saros is kind of a freak in that regard, which is great. You can do it, yes.
I know he's slight, but he's 6 foot. Like, he's not.
But 6 foot nowadays for goalies, man, is kind of.
I know.
It's on the bottom end of height, and especially when you're a butterfly. Like the NHL has the best of the best shooters, and if you go down a little too early, they're like, "Thank you," and we see him expose great goalies, Frank, like experienced goalies. So that's all I'm saying is I hope the kid does well, but there's lots of pressure, and I already think there's unrealistic expectations on him in Calgary.
I just want to see him on the roster consistently. The way that they've played him last year and beyond, it's only been with an injury. And I don't think that's any way to start an NHL career, is going up and down based on one of your goalies being hurt.
Yeah.
But my point is, at whether it was now with Markstrom requesting his way out after what happened last year, or whatever the case, moving Vladar, coming back with Markstrom and Vladar next season didn't make any sense for the Flames for the future. So don't underestimate the part of, it worked out this way with Markstrom wanting to go and based on the way that situation was handled, but don't mistake the need to get Dustin Wolf consistently playing in the NHL. I'm not saying throw him to the Wolves, pardon the pun. I'm saying he needs 35 games next year.
Well, that was what I was going to say. What do you think the split is for starts if everybody's healthy between Vladar and Wolf?
I think you go into it with a plan of trying to get him 30 to 35 games.
Yeah, I think that's a fair number. And honestly, this
and
might
if it
sound
flips
odd
because he plays so well, then that's a bonus.
And I'm strategic in who I start him against to start.
And I would also be concerned about Vladar's injury and the surgery that he had. Is he going to be ready? So just another thing to keep an eye on.
Well, then they might want to be getting another veteran number 3 goaltender. You know what I mean? So you're not like, oh, hey, Vladar's hurt. Hey, rookie, here you go. We're going to put all the pressure on you to start the season. That's not wise.
Before we move on, just a quick touch on the goalie situation around the league. So you've got the Sens and the Leafs still guaranteed to be looking. I would say those are because the Kings and Devils now solved their issues. I think you have to look at some other teams around the league as sort of lowercase potential options. What about the not the Florida Panthers? They're set. We're to talk about them in a minute. What about the Colorado Avalanche? I think Utah is pretty good. Probably need to ask the question about Detroit, even though they had 3 guys this year. And I think the Canes are pretty set, but if the right upgrade came along, something that they'd consider.
Well, as their GM said in his opening presser, hey, we're going to have to be wise in a complicated summer. So I won't be surprised if they if maybe they make a move, Frank, they don't expect, but I think they like their young goalie there. So to me, it's like the Allmark situation is intriguing for me. Colorado makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. So,
but what do you give up if you're Colorado? They're going to,
yeah, well,
here's the thing about Colorado is they're really concerned about their cap.
Mm-hmm.
They have to try and find a way to work Landeskog in and what's going on with Nichushkin. They might have to trade a roster player this summer just to try and get cap compliant. And maybe that player is part of what goes to Boston if that were to be if they really are interested in Allmark. But then you're going to have Allmark plus Georgiev, and that's going to be really expensive.
Yeah. So but
it's
like
not
that
easy.
idea.
I could see your point. It does make sense, but it's going to be really difficult to do the
now.
math.
What about Ottawa, Frank? Like they came out basically. You heard them say, "Hey, I don't think the goalies were happy with our play. I don't think we were." So at least it opens it up to think that they might be open for business to make a move for a goalie.
Well, I put Korpisalo out there as a buyout candidate, and no one said you're crazy.
Well, that's getting that window is getting closer here. Speaking of buyouts, before we get to the Tyler, and then we'll get to the Cup, Barclay Goodrow put on waivers, and he had a no movement clause, and he's kind of a no. Yeah, I read that article saying
not a no move clause. He had a no trade. There's
no
a huge
trade clause,
difference
yes.
because
huge
no
difference.
move means you can block waivers.
Yes,
and that's actually the root of the issue of how we ended up here. Is because he has a no trade and not a no move, he could go on waivers. I've seen a lot of people cry foul of this. No. This has always been the workaround and legally, or I should say CBA accepted outcome here.
Yeah, and the players,
where does it say you can't be placed on waivers?
Yeah, and the players, when they sign, know the difference between a no move and a no trade. It's pretty clear. So yeah, he can dislike it, and I understand that, but we're at a stage sometimes where I think, the no trade and no movement clauses, some of them get handed out like candy. Like, I get why players want it. I totally understand it, but I get why teams are like, I'm not really sure that we want Bob or Pete or whoever, 8th, 9th, 10th guy down the roster getting a no movement clause because it puts us in a tough spot. I would be
militant about handing them out. But then you look at the situation and you look at all these different guys that have them that end up getting moved anyway. Like, look at the Dubois situation. They gave him everything he wanted, and then they still moved him and found a way out of it.
Yeah. Oh, you can always. That's why.
And that's the point. It's like, hey, just placate and make them happy now. We only care about getting the player and getting them to sign on the dotted line. And if we need to, we'll figure it out after. I get that thought process. I don't have any issue with this.
Yeah. Like Barclay Goodrow, I can see him frustrated. He's going from a really competitive team to a team that's in a clear rebuild, Frank, that's years away from a rebuild. So he'll go there and they want him. He's been in the organization before. They made a really good, they got a first for him many years ago and worked the trade worked out very well for Tampa Bay as well. And for Barkley, because he ended up getting a life-changing contract. So he goes to San Jose. I could easily see him being a guy who gets traded from some salary retention, before his contract's done.
They can't. They don't
No,
have any retained salary slots.
No. I said before it's done, right? Like next
Wow.
year you could do it. Yeah, like this year you won't. He's stuck in San Jose unless he bounces back. I think he's better than what he showed this year in the regular season.
But he's never been a scorer. So if you're counting on him to score goals, it's not going to be the case. And that was really the difficulty when the Rangers signed him to begin with, is he was never really going to be a scorer.
No, but he's going to score more than 6 in my point.
I think they were really happy with what they got from him. They liked the leadership. They liked everything that he brought. It was a simple fact. You cannot pay your fourth line center $3.64 million on the cap. And he had a great playoff. And I think they were hoping that teams would be more interested to trade for him, but the math just isn't mathing in the NHL's cap.
No. And you know what? I get that it's going to be hard for him. It's been 4-5 years on really competitive teams. And now you're going to go backwards. And even if his time in San Jose, they were a really good team. So he's never been in this situation.
Come in and be a leader. I had a tremendous podcast conversation this week. It'll drop next week with new Sharks coach Ryan Warsofsky.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, I would run through a wall for that guy.
Here's the thing. I know people say Goudreau, hey, maybe it was a hot streak, Frank, but he did score 6 goals in 16 playoff games for the Rangers, right?
Okay, but it was 2 more than he had the entire regular season.
Yeah, I think he'll be a third line center in San Jose, who maybe at times it might be their second line, depending on how their season goes.
Just embrace it.
Yeah. So, and they got Ty Dellandrea from Dallas as well. So they're trying to become at least a little bit more respectable. And, for a young player who wasn't going to get a lot of chances in Dallas, that guy's going to get every opportunity in San Jose.
Yeah. Keep an eye on what happens next with Sam Steele. I don't think they've really started talks yet, but he's due a pretty big raise too. He's another big part of their fourth line in Dallas. I don't know, unless he can get some real term, I don't know that he's going to be signing. And they're going to be in tough with a QO offer. So keep an eye on Sam Steele as another potential trade option if it doesn't work out there. He could also become a UFA.
Let's bring in Tyler Yaremchuk to the pod. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing good, boys. I am doing good. Getting ready for another edition of Buy or Sell. It's brought to you by Wendy's. They only ever use fresh, never frozen Canadian beef in all of their burgers. Whether it's a JBC, a Dave Single, or a Baconator, that beef has never seen the inside of a freezer. Order today and check out the latest deals by downloading the Wendy's app. It is we'll call it a Cup Final edition of Buy or Sell today. So I got 3 takes on the Cup Final. You guys give me if you're buying or selling on my take. The first one, Connor McDavid is the clear-cut Conn Smythe Trophy favorite. His odds went from plus 700 to minus 150 right in the middle of Game 5. Greg, are you buying or selling on that?
He was plus 1,300 before Game 4.
Crazy.
It's hard not to. Florida would need, Bobrovsky would need a 40-save shutout, I think. To do it, Barkov's been pretty quiet here as
Bob's
of late.
done. Bob ain't winning the Conn Smythe. You can't give up 11 goals on a 35 shot stretch for a 686 save percentage and think that you're in the Conn Smythe conversation.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think Barkov has disappeared here lately too. Like his effort on the Connor Brown shorthanded goal, people were like, "What?" Now he's late in the shift, so maybe that's part of it. Brown just got on the ice. Yeah, I think it's McDavid. He would have to. Well, he's already done enough. I think he's probably winning.
The hard part, though, is, again, as a voter, what happens if the Panthers blow out the Oilers in Game 6? Is it really Connor McDavid's Conn Smythe? That would be a really tough look. Disagree?
Especially because they would have only won the 2 games, but at the same time, if they blow them out and it's 6-2 and Barkov has 1 point, is he not really the only other one that kind of makes sense right now?
It's not really about Barkov's points. It's been about what he had been able to hold guys too. But
David
the fact
scored 8 points in 2 games.
That's what I'm saying. That his
Gustav Forsling.
No,
it's Gustav. If they blow him out, maybe it's Gustav Forsling.
The nature of this award as playoff MVP, it shouldn't flip that wildly.
No, that's why I agree, and I don't think it will. Plus, I don't expect a blowout either way in Game 6.
So Greg's, you're buying. Frank, are you selling?
No, I'm not selling. I'm buying, but I don't think it's as there's nothing clear cut to me here.
Okay.
And that's everyone wants to say, oh, well, it has to be McDavid now. And it's like, no, it doesn't. That's not how it works.
All right. Second one I got for you, Frank. You just talked about Sergei Bobrovsky. Give me a buy or sell on this take. The Oilers have figured out Sergei Bobrovsky.
I will buy that.
Okay.
And even if they haven't, Sergei Bobrovsky's he's in his own head at this point. That goal that he gave up to McDavid on the goal line is highly alarming. I mentioned the stat from third period of game 3 through the second period of game 5. The Oilers scored 11 times on 35 shots against Bobrovsky. FYI, that doesn't include the 3 that Stolarz gave up, obviously. I'm just talking about Bobrovsky. 11 on 35. I don't know that we've ever seen a run like that from a goalie in a Stanley Cup final and remain in the net for a good chunk of it. Like, meaning he stayed in for the third period of game 3, all of game 5. Surprising. And a huge reason why the Panthers are heading back to Edmonton, frankly. Think about the way I disagree with Paul Maurice when he said that the pressure is not on the Panthers. It is 100% squarely on the Panthers, even though there's only one team that can win the Stanley Cup on Friday night. But what I do agree with is the notion that if you look at the way game 5 played out, the Panthers actually probably owned a good chunk of 5-on-5. However, they lost because they gave up a shorthanded goal, a crappy goal to McDavid on the goal line, and a once-a-season type play from McDavid. How often are all 3 of those things going to happen again, let alone any of the 3 next game? AKA, you get some more, to answer your original question, you get some more saves from Bobrovsky, and you probably win the Stanley Cup in game 5. Crazy perspective?
Yeah, I think McDavid surprised him because he hasn't been, where he shot from, no question. As for the question, did they figure him out? Well, I think it's important to say in the first 3 games, it was unsustainable. He was plus 5.43 saves above expected, right? Like he plus 5. That's what he had the most total in the first 3 rounds, according to Kevin Woodley. So in 3 games, and really game 2, it's not even that. It was game 1 and game 3, because game 2, the Panthers dominated and he didn't really have to get pressure very much. So you knew it was going to come back down to earth. Now there's 2 things Edmonton's done that's different. Connor Brown, look at his move on the breakaway compared to their 3 moves in the first game. They were all quick moves in tight. They didn't stretch him out. And even when they stretched him out, he still got a piece of it, but it just went past the end of his toe. If you're going to score on a breakaway on Bobrovsky, you have to go out and widen him out. And shooting a little bit more off the rush, which they definitely did in game 4. So I would think what they've done is they focus more on the pre-scout and are starting to take advantage of it.
All right, and last one to wrap up, buy or sell, brought to you by Wendy's. It's simple as this. This series is going 7. Buy or sell, Greg's?
Well, yeah. Who doesn't want game 7, a Stanley Cup final? Yeah, I'll take it game 7 for sure.
Frank, think the Oilers?
Yeah, we'd all take a game 7. That's not the question. Are the Oilers going to win game 6? So you're saying,
I think the Oilers win at home. Game 7, though, is a coin flip, man. It's so hard to win 4 in a row. I just think it's extremely difficult.
I think because everyone thinks that game 6 is a lock for the Oilers, that's the exact reason why they lose. You can't possibly. They're not going to lose on home ice.
I don't think they think it is, though. That's what matters.
I don't know. I'm not in their heads, but everyone. I haven't seen anyone say the Panthers are winning game 6. From one person.
Dude, people said the Panthers lost on purpose so they could win the cup at home in game 5.
Those people are idiots, though.
I know, but I actually like the Panthers in game 6. I think they didn't really play that poorly in game 5. And if they didn't. I think if they
best game since game 2.
I think if they replicate the same game, they probably end up breaking through.
Fair enough. All right. That is a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by brought to you by Wendy's. A quick note for Bet365. The Oilers open up as -120 favorites for Friday night's Game 6. See you, boys.
The other thing that's a good news for Florida is Matthew Tkachuk woke up. He scored that goal, and after the goal, he was a completely different player. He was incredibly engaged, and when you get one of your best players with some confidence, I think that bodes really well for them. The challenge for Florida is Edmonton's power play scored twice, and their power play has been proven. Ask Dallas. All of a sudden, they get a little mojo. That could be a big issue.
So one thing I'll say, we need to wrap the cup talk. The really tantalizing thing for the Oilers is if you get 2 monster games out of Leon Draisaitl, you probably win the cup.
Yeah, I think he's banged up, but
well, he's obviously banged up. But look at Connor McDavid's points by round: 12 in round 1, 9 in round 2, 10 in round 3, and 11 so far in the Stanley Cup final. Leon Draisaitl, 10 in round 1, 14 in round 2, just 4 in round 3, and he's only got 2 in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
All you need. We're not talking about forever. I say this all the time.
One game.
We're talking.
I would say one.
Yeah.
Because McDavid probably has one. And then the other wild card, Frank, how about Stuart Skinner's numbers in games 5, 6, 7 in the playoffs? He's 6-0. He's got a .928 save percentage and a .191 goals against. He has shown up when the games matter most in the postseason, and we'll see if that continues. Now, before we go, there was wasn't a trade, but a huge signing as the Vancouver Canucks lock up Hronek for a huge deal.
By the way, hold on. If you actually extend that stat back to games 4 through 7 in a series, Skinner is 9-0 with a .939 and .156. 9-0. What is it about the Oilers that makes them play better in the second half of series? Do they just adjust and figure it out? We talked at the beginning of the series about the Panthers doing things to them that no one had done to them so far defensively. Maybe they just see it and are able to pick through it.
Well, they have good scouting. I'll say that. Like, I know that Dustin Schwartz, Kevin Woodley said Dustin Schwartz is one of the best at scouting the other team's goalies and finding weaknesses. So we've seen it in every series. So, but yeah, give me your thought. What do you make of this big extent? Not a huge surprise. He had an unreal year. You had a qualifying offer, could not qualifying, could go to arbitration. What do you make of this deal for the Canucks?
I think it's a total perfect fit. I think had they gotten to a point where they couldn't come to terms on Phil Hronek, they'd have to go back to the drawing board. You have a right shot guy who helped take your star defenseman in Quinn Hughes to a Norris Trophy level, which he's likely going to win next week. And then you were thinking about, well, hey, what if we don't want to pay him an extra little bit? I think there's been a number. Look, I took an absolute beating on social media because I had been saying all along that I thought this contract was one that started with an 8 AAV based on just the ARB case alone. I think there's been a couple factors here in play. And so, yeah, obviously I take the L that it comes in at 7.25. The thing is, Hronek's play really in the playoffs really hurt his number. Like, had he had a strong playoff, I don't really have any doubt that he gets that number. And 2, I think there's such a tight bond between Hughes and Hronek that's ultimately what ended up getting this done. They want to continue to play together. I know the Canucks have ideas that Hronek can eventually drive his own pair, and I think he can. But just if you really want the answer, go to Quinn Hughes' Instagram. When the Canucks announced the deal, he screenshotted it and wrote stud. Not often that you see, teammates like that really find success, that are like, we can't let this guy go. And I think Quinn Hughes let it be known to management. And I think in the end, Hronek ends up taking slightly less to ensure that stays together. And that's a win for both sides. In a couple years, when the cap is $100 million, you're not even going to think about this contract.
Yeah. I'll say this though, long term, if the Canucks want to have success deep in the playoffs, I don't believe those two, they have to be separated. I don't think they can win with them as a pair. So I think they're better off to have them separated. It doesn't have to be next year. Obviously, you have to find someone who can play big minutes and play with Hughes. It's totally valid. Not easy to do. But I think when you get in the playoffs, Frank, it's been proven historically time and time again, size does matter. And when you have a 5'10" and a 6-foot guy together to play that many minutes, I just don't think it's a recipe for success. And so if it splits them up and you believe Hronek can drive a pair, well, that just makes you better because now you're going to have 45 minutes or 42, 3, 4 minutes with one of them on the ice.
By the way, well, see, I don't necessarily agree with your notion because we don't know who the numbers 3 through 6 defensemen are going to be for the Canucks. So when you say they can't win, if they find better mixes in their pairs, of course they could stay together and win. So you're talking future years. We don't know what that looks like yet. And two, Michael Bublé's comment on the signing, it was on Instagram. It kind of went viral yesterday. He wrote, "I thought Frank S said this starts with an 8." Anyway, Bublé reached out to me yesterday and we had a nice little chat. He apologized and said, "Hey, it didn't mean anything by it." And obviously none taken on my end. And always happy to talk hockey.
Well, hey, buddy, they're paying attention. That's what's good. So, yeah, no, 8 would like paying him more than Hughes. I just think optically would not have looked good. So, it's a wise, probably even for Hronek. There's just less pressure on you if you start with an 8 and Hughes is a 7.8. I just think you're setting.
They're not.
yourself
I've said it forever. They're not comps though. One was an RFA contract.
It doesn't matter.
And
It's
one was a UFA
optics.
contract.
And people would look and see this guy's getting paid more than Quinn Hughes, who's a Norris Trophy winner, and Hughes is clearly the better player. I just optically, I don't think you'd want that.
Yep.
So, Frank, have a good one. We will see you at the rink as we get set for Game 6. Should be a lot of fun. That's the rundown brought to you by Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. You can open an account at Bet365 today and use the promo code DAILY365 to bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Enjoy Game 6. Enjoy whatever trades or signings might happen on Saturday or Sunday. We'll talk to you next week.